Good morning, students. Today we will have our 11th session, and the title of this session is Fungi Reproduction and Growth. Before we talk more about the reproduction and growth of fungi, let us first know the different parts of a fungal structure and the different terminologies to name these parts. Cellus is the body of the fungi. So the whole body of a fungi is called cellus. There are two forms uh, of the body of the fungi. So either unicellular cellus or filamentous cellus. Unicellular is an example of the yeast fungi, and filamentous cellus is the example of mucor, which contains hyphae, and we talked about this before, that contains two types of hyphae, reproductive and vegetative hyphae. So the whole body of a fungus is called cellus, and it has two forms: unicellular, example yeast, and filamentous cellus, example for mucor. The other structure is the sporangium. As you can see here in the figure, this is a piece of bread, and usually the bread is it's a very good medium, or what we call stratum, for the growth of fungi. And this is very evident when you leave the bread outside or you keep it in a warm and moist environment. Then the next day you will find black spots in the bread, and this is the growth of fungi. If you look to these black spots under the microscope, and this is like a drawing for what really you can see under the microscope, is the different parts of filamentous fungi. So the filamentous fungi consist of sporangium, as you can see here. This is the sporangium, the head, the black head, and this is sac-like structure. And this contains the spores that as you can see here, this is the spores, the spreading one. They are carried out by or spread out or dispersed by air or wind. Okay, so the sporangium is the sac-like or capsule that is involved in the production of spores. So the spores are produced by the process of cell division, the mitotic or the mitosis cell division. And this, as you know from the biology, that mitosis, the result of mitosis division of the cell, is the production of haploid spores. When we say haploid spores, that means they contain half the number of the chromosome of a normal cell or a diploid cell, because these spores, they spread and they help in the sexual reproduction. They undertake the sexual reproduction, as we can see later when we speak about reproduction. They help in the sexual reproduction by mating with another spore or another cell, and then they produce the diploid cells, which contain the full number of the chromosomes. Of course, the number of chromosomes differ among different types of fungi. We are not going to talk about this, but you have to know that these spores are haploid. That means they contain half the number of chromosomes of a normal cell or a mature cell, or what we call a somatic cell. The other structure is the sporangiophores. So the sporangiophores, this is the hyphae, aerial hyphae, that carries the sporangium. So the sporangium, it contains the spores, and these are usually non-motile spores, and they are dispersed by wind or air. So the sporangiophore is the hyphae or aerial hyphae that carries the sporangium. Stolon is the as you can see here, is the septate hyphae. That means it contains septae or division of cells. They are separated by cell membrane and cell wall. So septate hyphae that connects between sporangiophores. So this is usually found on the surface of the bread or the stratum or the media where the fungi grow. Rhizoid, these are short, as you can see here. These are short seam filaments found in fungi and they help in anchoring. Anchoring, that means fixing the aerial hyphae to the stratum. And the other function is they capable of absorbing nutrients from the stratum. So the stratum here is the bread. So rhizoids is the thin filaments that anchor the aerial hyphae with together all the aerial sporangiophores and the sporangium to the stratum, and also they help in absorbing nutrients from the stratum. So these are the main structures of a fungal body, the cellus. So it consists of sporangium, sporangiophores, stolon, and rhizoid. Next, we are going to speak about the reproduction in fungi. As for the reproduction of fungi, we are going to speak about we have an overview of the fungal life cycle. There is a difference in the life cycle, a minimum difference between the different genera of the fungi, but they have a general life cycle where there is a similarity between the different genera. So in this course, we are going to have the overview of the fungal life cycle, and the minor changes or the minor difference, we are going just to speak about it when we come to speak about the different genera. So the general fungal life cycle, as you can see here in the diagram, it consists of two phases or two types: sexual cycle and asexual cycle. Usually, the filamentous fungi they live as sexual spores. When we say sexual spores, that means these are spores which are haploid. That means they contain half of the number of chromosomes of the normal or the parent cell. So that's when these haploid spores they carry the half the number of chromosomes. That means they are capable to mate or to fuse or to get into sexual cycle with other spore, so that they can produce what we call a parent cell. And that's a parent cell is like the parent cell which contains the whole number of chromosomes. So usually filamentous fungi, they start their life cycle with sexual spores. That means haploid spores. So each spore, they have two cycles. So here, as you can see, this is the hyphae. It divides by, if you remember in the biology, there are two division types of a cell: is mitosis and meiosis. So the mitosis gives the whole number of chromosomes, while the meiosis gives half the number of the cells that are produced from the meiosis. They carry half the number of the original or the parent cell. So mitosis usually is for somatic cells, if we speak about human being or plants, and meiosis is usually for germinal cells or sexual cells or sex cells. So here in the fungi, you can see first the hyphae. Okay, it divides by meiosis to produce sexual spores that carry N, that means half of the chromosomes. That's why we call them sexual spores. So this sexual spore germinates when there is a medium, suitable medium, okay? And the suitable medium, that means it is moist, it is warm, it has good temperature, it has the nutrients like the bread we already explained. So it germinates in the medium, producing what? It produces a mycelium. All these cells, they have N chromosomes. That means they are haploid. When it produces a mycelium, the mycelium takes one of the two routes. Either it goes sexual, asexual cycle, or sexual cycle. Let us start with the asexual cycle. So the mycelium divides by continue dividing by meiosis, because it carries n n n or haploid chromosomes. So it continues dividing by meiosis and produces what we called mitospores. These mitospores, which is the name comes from mitosis. So these spores then goes on and germinate and continue to produce mycelium, and so the cycle, the asexual cycle continues because it contains haploid cells or spores. The mycelium might mate or meet another mycelium, and they fuse together, and this is the start of the sexual cycle. So in this mating or the fusing, we call it fusing. The first step, what we call the plasmogamy. The plasmogamy, that means the cells, the two mycelium meet together, and the plasma of the two cells fuse together to produce one hyphae that carries two nuclei. So in the plasmogamy step or phase, the hyphae contains two nuclei. There is no fusion between the two nuclei of the two mycelium or the two hyphae. That is why at this step we call it dikaryotic. That means it has two nuclei. And this is written as N plus N. It's not 2N. No, it is N plus N because there are two nuclei. Okay, after the plasmogamy phase, then the hyphae, then the nuclei fuse together. Fuse together in the step what we call cryogamy. Cryogamy. That means the two nuclei fuse together and give one nucleus that carries the whole set of chromosomes. That means it's written 2N. As you can see here, this is 2N. So the 2N cell or hyphae then divides by mitosis, the normal cell division. It divides by mitosis and then followed by the process of meiosis to give spores that or cells that carry N. So from 2N, it carries N. And these are the spores, sexual spores that continue to the cycle, either sexual cycle or asexual cycle, as we explained. So this is a general overview of the fungal life cycle. So this can take place also in the yeast, unicellular fungi. Also the yeast cells, they also have both asexual cycle and sexual cycles. Of course, the yeast does not produce spores, but it produces cells, mitotic cells, and meiotic cells. Meiotic cells, that is from meiosis, and this is contain N chromosomes, or they are haploid cells, and contain as a parent cell that contain 2N, and this is the mitotic cells. So I expect that you already differentiate between the meiosis and the mitosis process as you had it in the first year of biology course. So this is the general life cycle of the fungi, and they differ actually, the different genera, they differ in maybe in the time of each process. Some of them they take longer time in the asexual, others take longer time in the in the sexual cycle, but at the end, regardless of the shape and the type of fungi, they undertake the sexual cycle and the asexual cycle. There are very few genera of fungi. They just have they just have sexual cycle. They don't undertake, or they don't undergo asexual cycle. So from the germination of the spores to produce mycelium, then the mycelium goes into mating, plasmogamy, and karyogamy, and then continues the cycle as sexual cycle, but doesn't have a sexual cycle. So this is one of the differences that confined to some fungi, while others fungi, also others, may just undertake a sexual cycle without the sexual cycle. So there is a difference between the genera, but at the end, most of the fungi, they have the two cycles, sexual cycle and asexual cycle. Next, we are going to speak more about the fungi reproduction, and the different other methods are used for vegetative reproduction and other types of reproduction processes. Okay, we already spoke about the cycle in general, but now we are going to speak about how the fungal cells increase in number. So we know that they divide either mitosis or meiosis, but these are different processes that take according to the type or the genera of the fungi. So here we are going to speak about the general processes of increasing the number of fungi. That means growth of the fungi increasing in number. So usually for fungi production, they reproduce by the three methods, either vegetative or asexual or sexual, or combination of all these three. But we are going to speak about each reproduction process and the types under each process, or the methods of increasing the number of the cells under each reproduction process. So usually the common thing is that most of the fungi, as we mentioned, they reproduce asexual reproduction. This is the commonest mood. But when there are severe or certain circumstances that happens within the stratum or the medium where the fungi grows, then they undertake the sexual reproduction. So for vegetative reproduction, if you remember when we spoke before about the types of hyphae, there is vegetative hyphae and reproductive hyphae. So there is a vegetative reproduction for both of these hyphae. That means how do they increase in number, or they get longer when the hyphae gets longer. That means it is dividing and increasing the number of cells within the filamentous or the filaments of the hyphae of the fungi. So for vegetative reproduction, and involves the fungal cellus, that means both vegetative hyphae and reproductive hyphae. And this vegetative reproduction, it has different methods of increasing the number of the cells. The first method is fragmentation, and this is one of the methods common in filamentous fungi. So where the hyphae fragments or breaks down into small parts, and each part then starts to develop its own mycelium under favorable conditions. So this is our divisions or breakdown of the hyphae, usually from the apical part, the upper part. They break down into hyphae, and then each of these segments develop into separate mycelium. This is how reproduction occurs or growth occurs for the hyphae. For unicellular, like yeast, there are two common methods: fission and budding. So, for unicellular fungi, which are the yeast, in fission is that the cell increase in number, the parent cell, and then separates into equal daughter cells. Equal, that means similar size cells. That means they are breaking in the middle where there are two nuclei. The nuclei divides into two. The nucleus of the parent cell divides into two. And then these two cells separate by the cytoplasm and wall formation into two identical cells. That means they are similar in size and similar in content. This is what we call fission. The other process of growth of yeast, which is the unicellular fungi, is by budding. Here in the budding, the parent cell, uh, there is the bud is the outgrowth of part of the cell, the parent cell, okay, and then and this bud grows in size, and then the nucleus divides, and one of the nucleus goes into the bud and one remains in the parent cell, and then it separates itself by from the parent cell and produce a new bud. This new bud becomes a parent cell and then starts budding again. So usually here the parent cell is larger, far larger than the bud. The bud is usually small. This is the difference between fission and budding. But these two processes are common in yeast or in unicellular fungi. The fourth method, the oidea is happens in the filamentous fungi that has hyphae. So the hyphae break up into individual cells called odia or arthrospores, and this each odium or each cell, and this happens actually in the septate hyphae. Okay, then this audio they become like they are round in shape or oval in shape, and they appear like beads on the hyphae. So each odium or arthrospore develops into a new mycelium. This is how the fungi grows, the filamentous fungi grows. So odia and fragmentation, these are common growth or division, or division or growth processes for filamentous fungi. And fission and budding is very common is common for the unicellular fungi, which are yeast. There is another type of reproduction, vegetative reproduction, which is the chlamydospores. The chlamydospores, these are perinating or storage bodies that appear within the hyphae. These storage bodies, they are single cell. This is a vegetative hyphae, and then these cells appear as thick, surrounded by resistant walls, and this usually happen when there is when there is adverse conditions. So chlamydospores appear on the hyphae as single cells surrounded by thick resistant wall that prevent it from drying out. And this is considered as storage bodies. They store the food and the that is required for the hyphae to grow when the conditions becomes favorable. So each chlamydospore gives rise to a separate mycelium. So these are considered storage bodies. And this is one of the methods of how the filamentous fungi grows. Rhizomorphs, these are found also in uh, higher fungi. That is means they are more advanced fungi, not simple, not unicellular, but filamentous and multicellular. And this rhizomorphs, as you can see here in the picture, these are mycelium. They tend to become like rope-like structures or interwoven structures. So these, as you can see here, they are very common on the roots of the trees, and these are considered. They become very condensed and dark in color, and these are considered storage bodies. They are root-like strands. They are root-like strands, and this happens when there is unfavorable conditions. That means if it is very cold or there is no moisture, that means that these conditions are unfavorable for the growth of the fungi. So they tend to form rhizomorphs, and when the conditions becomes favorable, then they form mycelium and usually give rise to fruiting bodies. As we explained before, fruiting bodies, these are aerial hyphae that protrudes out from the stratum or the medium where the fungi lives. So as you can see, this rhizomorphs are strand-like or root-like strands. So unlike sclerotia or sclerotia, so the sclerotia is it's also a storage structure, but in this condition, as you can see, its shape here, it's cylindrical or round shaped or clubbed shape, sometimes having irregular shape, but these are compact mass. Unlike the strands, these are compact mass surrounded by hard covering or hard walls, and it contains stored food, and usually produced when there is also unfavorable conditions. And this is very common in the cereal plants زي القمح. اوكي، نبات القمح بتلقي فيه انه it's affected by this type of fungi. Usually when there is adverse conditions, then it produces what is called sclerotia. So each one, what we call the singular, is sclerotium. When the conditions gets favorable, then it germinates and form a new mycelium. And this is how the filamentous fungi and the yeast fungi use the vegetative processes to increase in in number or grow and produce more of the fungal cells and more of the fungal hyphae. As for the asexual reproduction, and this is the common way of producing or reproducing in fungi other than sexual. And as I mentioned, sexual, there is a sexual cycle, but usually the most common, the asexual cycle. And this is entails or the production of spores. and we already talked about the spores. They are haploid bodies or cells. They contain haploid cells, and they might contain unicellular. They might be unicellular or multicellular, but mostly they are unicellular. And these haploid cells, they continue dividing by mitosis, because they are already produced by meiosis, but for growth and increase in number, they divide by mitosis. So the mitosis, that means the produced cell is similar in the number of chromosomes, contains similar number of chromosomes as the parent cell. And so this type of spores, we call them mitospores. So the spores, they vary in color, in shape, and size according to the genera of the fungi. This diagram shows the different types of or shapes and size of the different mitospores or asexual spores, and their size compared to other cells. So this is not is just for you to know that there is different types of spores according to the genera or the species of the fungus. So these spores, there are three types of spores. There is the first type, what we call sporangiospores, and these are produced inside the sac-like. And this one we've already talked about it before. It's into a sac-like structure called sporangium. As you can see here, this sporangium is carried by sporangiophores, and these are usually they are branched. They grow from one hyphae, but they tend to branch and give rise to aerial sporangiophores. The head of the sporangiophore contains a sporangium, which carries the spores, and what we call them sporangiospores. The shape of the sporangium could differ. It could be an oval, it could be a round, but at the end they have the sporangiospores stored within this sac. The sporangiospores, they could be motile or non-motile. The non-motile sporangiospores, we call them alpanospores. Aplanospores, these are non-motile spores. The other type of spores is the zoospores, and these are motile, unlike the alpanospores. So these are found in aquatic fungi. That means the fungi that live in water, and they are motile. As you can see here, they have flagellae, biflagellated sporangiospores. So these zoospores, they are motile, and they tend to move together. This process of moving together, because they are in the medium of in a watery medium, they tend to move together, and this process of moving together, we call it swarming. So these spores, they lack cell wall, but after they move together, they secrete the wall and germinate into what we call form a germ tube. It's a type of germination that helps them. The germ tube, it helps them to move together, to be very close together. So after that, they unlike the non-motile planospores, they tend to move together in a process what we call the swarming, because they are flagellated. The alpanospores, they have, of course, cell wall, and they are dispersed by wind, unlike the zoospores, because they can disperse by their motility in the watery medium. The third type of spores is the conidiospores, or the conidiospores, and this is non-motile spores. The thing is that they have different shape of the conidiophores. So the conidiophores carries spores which are non-motile, and these spores we call them conidiospores. And these conidiospores are carried in different shapes of conidiophores. Conidiophores, they differ just in shape, but they carry the same characteristic of the conidia, and this is non-motile spores. So again, they divide by mitosis within the conidiophores. So the conidiophores, they could take the shape of elongated, and this elongated shape, and this we call them synenema, and or maybe in the form of pycnidium, like this one. It's oval in shape, or it could be in the form of a saucer shape, like wide in shape, and this we call them a cervellus. And so they have different type of shapes. So this is the hyphae, and the conidia are the spores, and the body that carries the conidia. These are, we call them conidiophores. So the conidiophores, they differ in the different type of shapes. So this is how the fungi use spores or produce spores to reproduce asexually. The last thing we are going to talk about is the sexual reproduction. As in the sexual reproduction, this is the fusion of two compatible sex cells. When we say sex cells, that means they carry half of the of the gamete of the chromosomes. That means they are haploid, and then they mate or they fuse together to give a cell that is having, which what we call a diploid cell. But let us first know the different parts of the sexual reproduction. So sexual reproduction is one of the processes that takes place in certain types of fungi, and this is usually is not the common process. The common process is the asexual. So the fungi, they have certain genera. They have sex, what we call sex organs, and this we call them gametangia. Gametangia is they are the bodies that produce these type of cells which are haploid, and we call them gametes. There are two types of gametes. Male gametes, we call them antheridia, and in the female gametes, we call them scogonia. This is an example for ascomycetes. The name might differ from a genera to the other, like in the genera Basidiomycetes, they have different name. So they have the Basidia, and the which is it is the male one, and then we have the basidiocarp, where there is the two cells come together to produce a diploid cell. So the naming is a different. It differs from a genera to the other, but at the end there is a male gamete and there is a female gamete. When these two cells fuse together, the male and the female, they come together. Then they produce the diploid cells, and this goes with three phases. So these gametes may come from the same mycelium, and in this case we call it homothallic. The homothallic, that means it's coming from the same thallus. or they are coming from different mycelia, and this we call it heterocyclic. So these mycelia, if it is heterocyclic, then they could be from different strains, and then they combine together or fuse together in a process what we call sexual reproduction. So the sexual reproduction, it goes through three phases. The process itself goes through three phases. First phase is plasmogamy. So this is the union of the protoplasm of the two gametes or the two hyphae on different mycelium or on the same mycelium. So this is a fusion between the two protoplasm of the two cells. But at this stage, it does not the nuclei remain separate. That is why at this stage the cell or the hyphal cell, we call it di dikaryon. Dikaryon, that means it has two nuclei. So there is no fusion between the two nuclei at this stage. That is why we call it plasmogamy. Plasmogamy, from its name, that means plasma, the protoplast or the plasma of the plasma of the hyphal cells. The second stage is the karyogamy, and this stage there is a fusion between the two nuclei. Then, at this stage, the two nuclei fuse together, and in a process what we call it karyogamy. So, karyo, that means the fusion between the two nuclei. There could be a delay between phase one, which is the plasmogamy, and the karyogamy, according to the type of fungi. Certain fungi, they continue on the process of plasmogamy every time and then for reproduction as for a long time. So you might see under the microscope the hyphae, it has the cell has two nuclei, because this type of hyphae, it continues in the plasmogamy process for a longer time. Others, you might find one nuclei, because there is a fusion between the two nuclei of the two gametes, and this stage we call it karyogamy. After karyogamy, then the cell that is having the diploid cell that having the full number of chromosomes, then can undergo meiosis division. That means producing again haploid cells, which are again act as gametes for to continue the cycle of their sexual reproduction. As you know, the process of meiosis, one cell can give rise to four, four haploid cells, and each of these haploid cells becomes the gamete for further reproduction, sexual reproduction. The diagram here shows an example of sexual reproduction of basidiomycetes. As you can see here, these are mating types. There is positive and there is negative hyphae, and these hyphae, they mate together or they fuse together in the first process, what we call it plasmogamy. You can see here the hyphae are dikaryotic. That means there is a fusion between the plasma, but the nuclei remain separate. That's why you can see in a separate hyphae or in a separate cell, there are two nuclei. Then it goes into the second phase, which is karyogamy, and in this case, the hyphae start fusing the nuclei together, and at this stage we call it dikaryotic, and this is the fusion between the two nuclei. And of course, this karyogamy is followed by meiosis. So the meiosis, this hyphae divide to give four, for each hyphae divide to give, as you can see here on the top, it gives four cells or four basidium basidiospores. And these basidiospores, of course, can go into sexual reproduction or asexual reproduction according to the type of bacteria. But we are speaking here about the sexual. So this again give rise to hyphae and mycelium, and then this continue the cycle of sexual reproduction. So today we spoke about the fungal reproduction and growth, and I hope to see you in the coming lecture number 12.